The docking bay of the Ardent Star was large, cold, and filled with the low hum of engines that never fully went quiet. The walls were dark gray metal, and the lights were a pale blue color that made everything look a little sharper than it needed to be. It was not the kind of place that felt welcoming. It was the kind of place that told you, without saying a word, that you were expected to be useful or get out. Cole Harmon walked in like he had done it 100 times before. He was carrying a single bag over one shoulder. He was not tall in any dramatic way, not wide in any impressive way either. He had short brown hair, a jaw that had taken a few hits over the years and showed it just slightly, and brown eyes that moved around the room the way a soldier's eyes always do, not nervous, just watching. He wore the standard gray uniform of a coalition liaison officer, but it sat on him the way a borrowed shirt sits on someone who is used to wearing something else entirely. Behind him, a step and a half back, came Nina Garza. Nina was shorter than Cole, with dark hair pulled back tight and an expression that sat somewhere comfortable between amusement and mild annoyance. She was a field medic, officially. Unofficially, she was the kind of person who had an opinion about everything and the good sense to know exactly when to say it out loud and when to keep it to herself. She had served with Cole before, on 2 other assignments, and had long ago decided that wherever Cole went, things would eventually get interesting. She had accepted this the way you accept the weather. A Cyrath officer was waiting for them at the far end of the bay. The Cyrath looked, to human eyes, something like a tall person who had been drawn by someone who had only heard humans described, and never actually seen one. They stood upright, had 2 arms and 2 legs, and had faces that could express things, but everything about them was a little longer, a little smoother, and a little cooler than a human face. Their skin ran in shades of pale silver and dark gray, and their eyes were a solid amber color, with no visible white. They moved with a kind of controlled precision that made it look like they never did anything by accident. The officer standing in front of them was doing exactly that, standing, still, watching. Her name was Valera San. She was the second in command of the Ardent Star, and she had been assigned to brief the new human crew members upon arrival. She looked at Cole the way someone looks at a report they are not sure will be useful, not with disrespect, but with careful, neutral evaluation. "You are Cole Harmon," she said. Her translator rendered the words cleanly, with almost no accent. "Combat liaison, former ground forces, assigned to this vessel under Coalition Joint Crew Directive 7. "That's me," Cole said. "And you are Nina Garza, medical officer." "Also correct," Nina said pleasantly. Valera looked at them both for a moment longer than was strictly necessary. Then she turned and began walking. "Follow me. I will show you your quarters, and then brief you on ship protocols." Cole followed without hesitation. Nina fell into step beside him, and said nothing, but she tilted her head just slightly in the direction of Valera, and gave Cole a small, pointed look. Cole gave her a small look back that said he had already noticed. The Ardent Star had a crew of 61, and Cole and Nina were the only humans on board. This was not unusual for a joint crew ship in the early days of the Coalition's Human Integration Program. The program was only 3 years old, and the debate about whether it was a good idea had not stopped, simply because the decision had already been made. There were species in the Coalition, old species, proud species, who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years before humans had figured out how to leave their own atmosphere. To those species, humanity's arrival in the Coalition was not an achievement. It was more like a noisy neighbor moving in next door and immediately asking to borrow the car. The Cyrath were not the worst of them. They were not cruel or openly hostile, but they were a people who measured everything, courage, intelligence, worth, against a standard they had built over centuries of their own history. And humanity, so far, had not been measured against that standard in any meaningful way. Humanity was new. Humanity was untested. Humanity was, as far as most of the crew was concerned, an experiment that had not yet produced results. Cole seemed completely unbothered by this. During the first 2 days aboard, he showed up on time for every briefing, listened more than he talked, asked questions that were specific and reasonable, and never once tried to make anyone like him. He learned the names of every crew member he met, including the Sirath ones that required a slightly different position of the tongue to say correctly. He made 1 or 2 small jokes in the common area, and did not seem bothered at all when nobody laughed. He ate whatever the ship's galley offered and said it was fine, even when Nina made a face that suggested it was not fine. Zir, a young Sirath crew member who worked in navigational support, watched Cole from a distance with open curiosity. Zir was newer to the crew than most, still in that stage of life where the instinct to ask questions was stronger than the training to suppress them. He watched Cole the way you watch something that does not match any category you already have. Captain Orendale observed the new arrivals from a professional distance. He was a careful, experienced officer who had commanded the Ardent Star for 11 years. He had supported the Joint Crew Directive because he believed in the Coalition's mission. He reserved his judgment. He was good at that. Valera said nothing about Cole beyond what was required by her duties. She gave him his briefings. She answered his questions. She corrected him once, politely, when he used the wrong term for a section of the ship. And Cole thanked her without any trace of embarrassment. She noted that. She noted most things. On the 3rd night, the ship received a distress signal. It came from a small Coalition outpost at the edge of a contested sector, a place nobody particularly wanted to be. The outpost had been reporting minor raider activity for weeks. The signal now suggested the activity was no longer minor. Captain Orendale called a response team together within the hour. Cole was included. It was his job to be included. He showed up to the briefing room with his bag already packed, and his expression exactly the same as it had been every other moment since he had stepped onto the ship. Calm, attentive, and entirely impossible to read. Nina, also assigned, sat beside him and quietly opened her medkit to check the contents. "You already checked that twice," Cole said. "I know," she said. "It helps me think." Valera stood at the front of the room and began the briefing. Her voice was steady and precise. Her amber eyes moved across the room as she spoke, and when they landed on Cole, they stayed for exactly 1 second longer than they landed on anyone else. Then she moved on, and the briefing continued, and the Ardent Star turned toward the distress signal and the dark space between the stars. The outpost was a small, ugly building sitting on a rock that had no name, only a number in the Coalition's navigation records. It had been built quickly, staffed lightly, and forgotten about in the way that small outposts in contested sectors often are. Remembered only when something went wrong. Something had gone very wrong. The response team came down in a shuttle and landed 200 meters from the outer wall. Before they even stepped outside, they could see the smoke. Before they reached the door, they could hear the sound of weapons fire coming from somewhere inside. It was not the organized sound of a defensive position holding its ground. It was the scattered, broken sound of people trying to survive 1 more minute. Valera moved to the front and assessed the situation in the quick, precise way the Sirath were trained to do. She pulled up the outpost's floor plan on her wrist display and began calculating. The response team had 8 members. The Drund, a mercenary species built wide and heavy, with thick-plated skin and a reputation for not stopping once they started, had breached the inner corridor based on the sounds coming through the walls. Long-range weapons were the correct tool. Distance and cover were the correct approach. Then her scanner made a quiet sound, and her expression shifted by the smallest degree. "Signal scrambler," she said. "Embedded in the structure. It is disrupting directed energy weapons. Effective range is the entire building. The team looked at each other. The drone inside did not use directed energy weapons. They used older, physical ammunition, the kind that didn't care about scramblers, the kind that went through walls. Tactical withdrawal is the recommended course of action, Valera said. She was not being cowardly. She said it the way you say something when the numbers have already given you the answer. Cole had been standing slightly to the side, listening to all of it. His rifle was in his hands. He looked at the building. He looked at the floor plan on Valera's display. He looked at the scatter of the sounds inside, where they were coming from, how many, how often. Then he set his rifle down against the outer wall. Nina closed her eyes briefly. "Cole," she said. "There are still people alive in there," he said. His voice was very calm. "The scrambler is in the east section. If someone can get to it from outside and shut it down, your weapons work again. You just need a couple of minutes." "You are suggesting," Valera said, slowly, "that you go inside, without a functioning weapon." "I have a knife," Cole said. "There are at least 9 drawn in that building. I counted 11 actually, based on the sound pattern." He picked up his combat blade and checked it once. "Just get to the scrambler, from the east exterior panel. 2 minutes, maybe 3. He did not wait for her to approve the plan. He moved to the door and went inside. Valera stood still for exactly 1 second. Then she turned sharply to 2 team members. "East wall, now." She moved toward the door herself and stopped just inside it, where she could see down the main corridor without being seen. What she saw in the next 3 minutes stayed with her for a very long time. Cole moved through the corridor like someone who had stopped calculating and started simply doing. The first drone he met came around a corner at speed, which most people would have tried to avoid. Cole moved into it instead, stepped inside the swing of its arm, used the creature's own weight and direction against it, and had it on the ground before it had finished the motion it had started. It was fast and ugly and completely effective. The second one was bigger. It hit Cole once in the side before he got his angle right, and he absorbed the hit with a grunt and kept moving like the hit was a detail he would think about later. He found a door frame, used it, came around low, and that drone went down too. There were more. The drone were not small opponents. They were built to take punishment and keep going, and they had numbers. But Cole did not fight the way the Sirath fought, with distance and calculation. He fought the way something fights when it has decided, deep in whatever part of a person makes these decisions, that the only direction available is forward. He took hits and used the pain like information. He read every room before he entered it, and was already moving to the next problem before the current one had fully finished falling. Valera watched from the corridor entrance. She did not look away. She had seen Sirath warriors fight. She had seen coalition soldiers from 4 different species in combat. She had training in tactics and had studied hundreds of combat records going back generations. Nothing in any of that had prepared her for what a human looked like when he had made a decision that fear was simply not going to be part of the process. Behind her, the scanner beeped. The scrambler was down. Directed energy weapons came back online. The team moved in. It was over in under a minute after that. When the dust settled, Cole was standing in the middle of the corridor. His left shoulder had a cut that Nina was already moving toward. His breathing was a little heavier than normal. There was a bruise forming along his jaw. He looked around the corridor once, like he was checking the math on something, and then looked at Nina. "Is there any coffee in the ration pack?" he asked. "You have a cut on your shoulder," she said. "Is there coffee?" "Yes, there is coffee," she said, pulling out her kit with an expression of deep personal suffering. Valera was standing near the corridor entrance. She had not moved since the team came in. The rest of the crew was moving around her, checking the outpost's survivors, securing the area, doing all the things that needed doing. She stood still and looked at the corridor Cole had just walked out of. Young Zir moved up beside her quietly. He was still processing everything he had just seen. He was trying to find the right Sirath word for it, and could not. He heard Valera say something. It was very quiet, barely even a breath. He was not sure she knew she had said it out loud. It was in Sirath, not in Coalition common language, and it did not translate cleanly. But the closest meaning was something like, "I want him to be mine." Zir looked at her. She was still watching the corridor. Her expression had changed in a way he had never seen on her face before. He decided, very wisely, not to say a single word about it. They came back to the Ardent Star with 6 outpost survivors, 1 medic with an opinion about everything, 1 human with a bandaged shoulder, and a ship full of crew members who were no longer entirely sure what to make of Cole Harmon. It was not a dramatic change. The Sirath did not do dramatic changes. It was more like the way a room shifts when someone opens a window. Everything is technically the same, but the air is a little different, and you notice it without being able to point at exactly what moved. Crew members who had previously looked past Cole now looked at him. Not with warmth exactly, not yet, but with the kind of attention that means you have been recategorized. You are no longer an unknown. You are something that has been observed and filed under a new heading. For the Sirath, that was significant. Captain Oren Dale called Cole to his office the morning after they returned. Cole went without any idea what to expect, and came back 20 minutes later looking exactly the same as he always looked, which was to say, unreadable. Nina asked him what happened. Cole told her the captain had given him a formal commendation. Nina stared at him. "A Sirath formal commendation," she said. "On your 5th day?" "6th, Cole said. "That is either very impressive or very concerning," she said. "I haven't decided which." "It's probably both," Cole said, and went to get something to eat. Zur was waiting for him in the galley. The young Sirath had clearly been thinking about this moment, because he had a list of questions ready that he had written down on his personal datapad. Cole looked at the list, looked at Zur, and sat down with his food and said, "Go ahead." What followed was the beginning of a routine that would repeat itself many times over the next several weeks. Zir asked questions about human combat, about why humans fought the way they did, about whether pain affected their decisions, about the concept of momentum in close-quarters situations, about whether humans trained their minds the same way they train their bodies. Cole answered every question with patience. Some of his answers were technical. Some of them were simple. Some of them were things like, you stop thinking about whether it's going to hurt, and start thinking about what happens after. And that shift is most of it, honestly. Zir wrote all of it down. Cole found this genuinely funny, which confused Zir, which Cole then had to explain. "It's not bad," Cole told him. "It's just, you're very thorough." "Information is best preserved with precision," Zir said seriously. "Yeah," Cole said, "that's fair." Valera did not come to the galley during those sessions, but she reviewed the combat footage from the outpost mission. Not once, several times. She told herself it was for tactical analysis, that understanding how a human moved in close combat was useful strategic information for a second-in-command to have. She told herself this in the same careful way you tell yourself something when you are aware at some level that it is not the whole truth. She watched Cole move through that corridor again and again. Not the hits, not the outcomes, just the movement, the decision-making inside the body before the mind had time to interfere. There was a word in the oldest form of Sirath language for this kind of movement, a word that translated roughly as the thing that does not stop because it has chosen not to. It was a word used in old warrior poetry, not in tactical reports. She had not thought of that word in years. She closed the footage file and went back to her duty reports. 2 days later, she found herself in the ship's lower observation corridor at the same time Cole was there, standing at the viewport and looking at nothing in particular. She had not planned to be there. That was the detail that stayed with her afterward, that she had not planned it. She stood near him and looked out at the same stretch of space. "Your shoulder," she said after a moment. "Fine," he said. "Nina is very good." "She is," Valera agreed. A pause. "The move you used in the fourth junction of the outpost, the turn inside the arm reach. Where did you learn that?" Cole looked at her for a moment, like he was deciding something. He talked about his training, about his time in the ground forces, about the idea, which the Seraph found genuinely strange, that humans had developed hundreds of different systems of hand-to-hand combat, over thousands of years of fighting each other, and that most soldiers learned pieces of several of them, and stitched it all together into something personal. "You fought each other," Valera said, not as a judgment, more like she was placing a piece into a pattern. "For a very long time," Cole said. "We got very good at it." Valera was quiet for a moment. The Sirath fought each other as well, in early history. "Most species did," Cole said. "Yes," she said, "but most species do not carry the memory of it in their bodies, the way humans appear to." Cole looked at her. It was a direct, honest look, the kind that did not have any performance in it. "That's maybe the most accurate thing anyone has ever said about us," he said. Valera looked back at him. For one moment, the professional distance she kept around herself, like a second uniform, was simply not there. Then it came back, smoothly, the way it always did. She gave him a small, precise nod and said that she had duty reports to complete. She walked back down the corridor, at the same measured pace she always used. But she did not look at her duty reports when she got back to her station. She sat at her desk and thought about a word from an old language. And she thought about the way Cole had looked at her when he said that. Like he was just being honest. Like honesty was simply the most natural thing in the world. It was a very human thing. She was beginning to think she did not mind it. Admiral Keth Var arrived on the Ardent Star on a Tuesday, which was a human way of marking time that meant nothing on a ship that ran on Coalition standard cycles. But Cole noted it as a Tuesday anyway, because Cole was human, and humans do things like that. The Admiral came aboard for what was officially described as a routine inspection. He was tall even by Cyrus standards, with the kind of posture that had been trained into him so long ago it had become bone. His rank markings were precise and many. He had the face of someone who had decided at some point in his life that the world was either with him or beneath him, and had not revisited that decision since. He did not like humans in the Coalition. He had not made this secret in any official forum, because officially he supported Coalition policy. But there are ways of not liking something that don't require words, and Admiral Var had perfected all of them. When he walked through the Ardent Star during his inspection and passed Cole in the corridor near the planning room, he stopped. Cole stopped too. The Admiral looked at him the way someone looks at a piece of furniture that has been placed in the wrong room. Not angry, just incorrect. "Liaison officer," the Admiral said. "Admiral," Cole said, "I have read the report from the outpost mission." The Admiral's voice was smooth and measured. "It describes your actions in terms that some members of this crew appear to find impressive." "That was kind of them," Cole said. "I find it less impressive," the Admiral said, "than reckless. A Coalition officer who discards his weapon and enters a hostile structure alone is not demonstrating courage. He is demonstrating a failure to value Coalition resources, which includes himself." Cole listened to all of this. His expression did not change in any visible way. "With respect, Admiral, the Scrambler made the weapons useless inside, and there were people alive in that building." "There are always people alive somewhere," the Admiral said. "That is not a military strategy." "No," Cole agreed, "but it was a reason." The Admiral looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind his amber eyes. Not quite anger, but close to it. The kind of feeling that comes when someone refuses to be managed. Humans, he said quietly, almost to himself, have a very high opinion of their own instincts. We've had to rely on them a lot, Cole said, still calm, still even, not backing up an inch. The Admiral said nothing more. He walked on. Valera had been standing around the corner of the corridor. She had not meant to overhear it. She had been on her way to the planning room and had stopped when she heard the Admiral's voice. She stood there until his footsteps faded, and then stayed a moment longer. Cole came around the corner and found her there. He did not seem surprised. "How much of that did you hear?" he said. "Enough," she said. Cole nodded once and kept walking. Valera turned and walked alongside him without deciding to. They were quiet for a moment. "He has done this before," she said, "with officers he considers undesirable on coalition vessels." "I know," Cole said. She looked at him. "You know?" "Nina did research on him before we shipped out. She does that." A small pause. "She said he has a pattern of making things difficult for crew members he disagrees with, quietly, in ways that are hard to point at officially." Valera was quiet. "You should be careful." "Yeah," Cole said, and then because he was Cole, "Are you worried about me?" The question was not aggressive or teasing. It was simply direct, the way Cole was direct, the way humans were direct, in a manner the Siraths still found slightly startling. Valera looked ahead and said nothing for 2 steps. Then she said, "I am noting a potential threat to a crew member under my responsibility." "Of course," Cole said, and he smiled, just slightly, looking ahead. She saw it, and she said nothing. But something in her chest did a thing she chose not to examine immediately. What neither of them knew yet was that Admiral Var had already been making plans. He had reviewed the assignment rosters during his inspection and had made a small, quiet change to an upcoming mission, a forward position scouting assignment that needed 2 people. He had put Cole and Nina in that position. Officially, it was a routine rotation. Unofficially, the intelligence attached to that assignment had a note, buried deep, not immediately visible, suggesting the area was considerably more dangerous than the mission category implied. It was not something anyone would notice quickly. It was the kind of move that a man with decades of experience and a careful, patient dislike could make without leaving fingerprints. The Admiral was very good at this. Cole noticed it that night. He was reviewing the mission data before lights out when something in the numbers caught him. Not obviously wrong, just slightly off. The kind of off that a man who had been sent into bad positions before recognized the way you recognize the smell of rain before it arrives. He went through it twice. Then he got up and knocked on Nina's door. Nina opened it, looked at his expression, and said, "What did he do?" It was not a question. Nina read it, and then used a word that the translator unit handled gamely and without comment. She asked what they were going to do. Cole told her they were going to go to the position as assigned, and while they were there, they were going to make sure the truth of what the assignment actually was found its way back to the bridge in a format that nobody could ignore. "That sounds like a plan that involves us being in a dangerous place," Nina said. "Yeah," Cole said. "Okay," she said, and went to repack her medkit. Cole went back to his room and sent one message before sleeping. It was to Valera. It was short. It said, "Look carefully at the mission data for the forward scouting assignment, specifically the threat classification footnotes on page 3. He sent it and lay back and looked at the ceiling for a while. Across the ship, Valera read the message. She opened the file. She read page 3. She sat very still for a long time. Then she began pulling other records, quietly, carefully, the way a second-in-command pulls records when she wants to build something airtight before she says a word to anyone. She worked through the night. By morning, she had everything she needed. The forward position was a narrow ridge on the dark side of a small moon, with low rock walls on 2 sides and open sky above. It was not a good place to be if anything decided to come looking for you. Cole had been in worse places, but he had never been in worse places on purpose, which made this one feel a little different. Nina set up her equipment behind the larger of the two rock walls and kept her voice low. "I want it noted," she said, "that I am a medic and not a scout, and this assignment makes no structural sense." "Noted," Cole said. "I also want it noted that I looked up the last 3 teams assigned to this moon, and 2 of them filed incident reports." "Also noted," Cole said. He was watching the sky with a small scanner in his hand, moving it slowly across the dark above them. "You're doing the thing where you talk when you're nervous." "I am always nervous," Nina said. "I am a medic on a spaceship. Nervousness is a professional requirement." She paused. "Are you nervous?" Cole thought about it. "A little," he said. "Enough to be useful." She looked at him. "That is either the most soldier thing anyone has ever said, or the most concerning." "Probably both," Cole said. What came in the next 4 hours was not comfortable, but it was survivable, which was the specific outcome Cole had been aiming for. The area was indeed more dangerous than the mission classification suggested. There were active patrol drones moving through the sector that the briefing had not mentioned, and twice Cole had to move them both quickly and quietly into cover that was not ideal, but was better than the alternative. Nina did not complain once she was in motion. She was good in the field in the way that people are good when they have stopped pretending the situation is something other than what it is. Through all of it, Cole was sending data back to the Ardent Star. The drone signatures, the patrol patterns, the classification of equipment being used. Everything that made it clear this was not a routine scouting position. He sent it clean and clear and attached it to the official mission record where it could not be quietly removed later. And on the ship, Valera was waiting for it. She had spent the night building a case, the way a Sirath builds anything that matters, with precision and patience and every piece in its correct place. By the time Cole's data started coming in, she had the full picture. She took it directly to Captain Orendale and laid it out in front of him on his desk without a single unnecessary word. The captain looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Valera. "You are certain," he said. "I am certain," she said. The confrontation with Admiral Var happened in the captain's office, with Valera present and the full record open on the table between them. The admiral looked at the record, and then looked at Valera, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he began to offer an explanation. Valera took that explanation apart piece by piece, calmly, the way you take apart something that was not built very well once you know where all the joints are. She had an answer for every part of it. She had documentation for every answer. It was by any measure a complete dismantling. The admiral was formally relieved of advisory authority and removed to his own quarters, pending a coalition tribunal. Captain Orendale stood at the viewport of his office after the admiral left and was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Valera and said that he was glad she had come to him with it. "I had good information," she said. "Yes," the captain said, "you did." Cole and Nina came back from the moon that evening. Cole walked off the shuttle, looking like someone who had spent a long day in the cold, doing something uncomfortable, and was ready to be done with it. Nina walked off behind him, looking like someone who had also done that, and intended to eat a full meal and not speak to anyone for 30 minutes. Valera was in the docking bay when they landed. She was not required to be there. It was not part of her duty rotation. She was there because she had decided to be there, which was its own kind of statement, for someone who was usually very precise about where her presence was and was not required. Cole saw her. He stopped. The docking bay had a few other crew members in it, technicians, 2 junior officers doing equipment checks. None of them were paying particular attention. Nina glanced between Cole and Valera and decided immediately that her 30 minutes of not speaking to anyone began right now. She walked past both of them toward the corridor without a word, which was, in its own way, the kindest thing she could have done. She walked toward Valera. She did not move toward him or away from him. She stood and waited, which was the Sirath way of saying, "I am not leaving." "Thank you," Cole said. "You sent me the information," she said. "I used it." "You stayed up all night, building the case," he said. She looked at him. "You knew that." "I figured," he said, "because that's what you do when something matters." Valera was quiet for a moment. The docking bay hummed around them. Somewhere behind Cole, a technician dropped something metal, and it rang against the floor, and faded into nothing. "I want to show you something," she said. "If you are not too tired." "I'm not too tired," Cole said. She took him to the upper observation deck, the one at the very front of the ship, where the viewport curved wide and showed you more of the sky than you usually got to see at once. It was empty at this hour. The stars outside were very clear and very still, which was an illusion because nothing out there was actually still, but it looked that way from here. They stood side by side at the viewport for a moment without speaking. Cole was looking at the stars. Valera was looking at them too, though she was also, without fully committing to it, aware of exactly how close he was standing. Then she spoke. She spoke in Sirath first, a slow, careful sentence, the kind you say when the words matter, and you want them to land correctly. Then she translated it herself, into Coalition Common, slowly. In the Sirath language, there was a phrase, older than the Coalition, older than their current calendar, that a person said when another person had become part of their world in a way that could not be undone. It was not the same as a declaration of love, though love might come from it. It was more like a recognition. It meant, "I see you now in a way I cannot unsee. You are in my world, and I have chosen to leave you there." Cole listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked her to say the Sirath version again, slowly, so he could try to learn the sounds. Valera turned and looked at him. She was not sure what she had expected him to say. She looked at him, at this human, this entirely unreasonable, unbothered, quietly brave human, and something happened in her chest that she had no Sirath word for either. She laughed. It came out before she could stop it. A real laugh, the kind that surprises you because it arrived before your permission. She put one hand up briefly, as if she could catch it, and then gave up and let it be what it was. Cole was grinning. It was a good grin, uncomplicated. "That good, huh?" he said. "You are," she said when she could speak again, "a very strange person, Cole Harmon." "Yeah," he said. "I've been told." Outside the viewport, the stars burned on across the dark. The ardent star moved through them at a steady, quiet speed. Inside, two people stood close together in the pale light of the observation deck, and neither of them moved away. It was not an ending. It was something that was just beginning, slow and careful and real, the kind of thing that starts with a whisper in a dark corridor and becomes, over time, a whole new part of the universe. Somewhere below decks, Zier sat in the crew lounge and wrote it all down in his datapad. He had no word for what he was observing. He decided it did not need one. Some things he was learning were bigger than words.